storytelling contests to captivating exhibitions, BLF 2025 is full of inspiration.
And let's not forget the incredible speakers, authors, and artists who will be gracing the stage to share their wisdom, stories, and visions.
But before we dive into the magic of the festival, let us introduce you to something truly special, the BLF 2025 Memento.
This year's Memento is a masterpiece created by the legendary Padma Shri Bhil artist Bhuri Bai.
Her painting for BLF 2025 beautifully captures the essence of nature, earth, humanity, and the environment. It's a profound reminder of the interconnectedness of all the things that circularity that sustains our existence.
This artwork is not just a memento, it is a message, a call to embrace harmony and balance in our lives and our relationship with the world around us.
Let us take this moment to applaud Bhuri Bai's exceptional talent and her contribution towards this festival.
We warmly welcome you all to the Rangdarshini Hall. And now, without further ado, it's time to dive into the first session of BLF 2025.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's an absolute delight to welcome you all to this amazing session, Story Writing for Children. You know, stories have a magical quality. There's just something about stories that transports us to faraway lands and sparks our imagination and, plants seeds of wisdom in the most subtle yet the most delightful ways. When times are hard, stories give us a place where we can just relax and rest. They feel like a safe, warm hug. For children, stories are not just a source of entertainment. They are a gateway to the basic understanding of the world and their emotions and even themselves.
Let me ask you all a question. Do you remember the first story that captured your heart? Perhaps it was a tale of courage, adventure, or even a simple bedtime story told with love. Stories shape our childhood and, in many ways, define who we become.
Today, we delve into the world of writing for children, a craft that just not requires only creativity but also deep understanding of a child's heart and mind. How does one create characters that children adore? What makes a story not only memorable but also impactful? How stories can empower children to dream, to question, and to grow?
To explore these questions and more, we are privileged to have with us three exceptional storytellers, Tultul, Biswas, Shailaja, Menon, in conversation with equally remarkable Shailaja Srinivasan.
These storytellers have touched young lives with their words and weaving tales that inspire, educate, and entertain. Their experiences, insights, and creative processes will give us a behind-the-scenes look on how stories for children actually come to life.
But before we embark on this journey of storytelling, let us introduce our distinguished speakers and invite them to the stage with a round of applause.
Our first speaker, Tultul Biswas ji, she is a lover of books, especially children's books. After doing masters in chemistry and sociology, she has taught science to middle school children in Bhopal with Eklavya Foundation since 1991. She has started as an assistant editor with Chamak, Eklavya's flagship children magazine, and then worked over 2 decades developing books. Presently engaged in designing co-learning opportunities for teachers and education activists to bring about lasting change in classroom practices. She is also a part of the leadership team in Eklavya. She has been a part of the Indian feminist movement and has keen interest in folk and classical music of the subcontinent. We are glad to have you with us, ma'am. Joining her is Dr. Shailaja Menon ji. Dr. Shailaja Menon currently leads early learning literacy initiatives at Tata Trusts. Prior to this, she taught literary and children's literature courses at University of Colorado, Boulder, and Azim Premji University, Bangalore. She is a co-editor of various children's books. She serves as an editor of the journal Contemporary Education Dialogue, and her articles have been carried in journals nationally and internationally. She was the founder anchor of the annual Bilingual Children's Festival at Azim Premji University and serves on the prominent children's literature juries in India and in abroad.
And leading this fascinating conversation is Shailaja Srinivasan ji. She is Bhopal-based editor with a passion for developing children's non-fiction books. She enjoys gardening in her spare time.
So now, without any further ado, let us step into the magical world of children's stories and uncover the art and heart behind creating them. Over to you. Thanks.
Thank you all for being here. Closer? Oh.
Hello.
Thank you all for being here, and welcome to the 7th edition of Bhopal Literature Festival. I have to say our charming master of ceremonies here have basically given my intro, whatever I was going to say earlier. But having prepared it, I'm going to read it anyway. So when you hear the words children's stories or children's books, are you transported back to a time when you were little? Maybe 7 or 11, and had a favorite story that made you smile or gave you comfort. There was something about it in the book or a story that stayed with you. Those who write memorably for children write what speaks to both the child and to the adult they grow up to be. Children's books are engines of wonder, offering a vision of the world, not only as it is, but also what might be. They're fundamental to our culture, to the grown-ups we become, and to the societies we build. So if as an adult you're lost, reach out for a children's book, because children's literature is a form of distillation of what it means to hope, crystallized simply and elegantly into meaning. There's a willed optimism inherent to writing for children. And children's writing is hard, because it has to understand the art of writing, and it has to understand childhood. All children have to be able to find themselves in the books they read. So with that, I would like to welcome Tultul and Shailaja, whose introductions have already been given, so I will not repeat. And we'll be talking today about children's books, An Indian Story, edited by Dr. Shailaja Menon and Sandhya Rao, and published by Eklavya Foundation. Without further ado, then we will get into describing to our audience. First question I'll address to Dr. Shailaja Menon, to please describe the genre of what is children's literature.
You started, can you hear me? She started with the not answerable question first, because then we decided that we'll start with the toughest, and then by the end it'll be quite easy, I hope. So, if you say what is children's literature, at a gut level we all know what children's literature is, and yet if we are asked to define it, it's one of the hardest things to define. Because if you look at this word children's literature, you've got to understand who children, the word children and the word literature, and then bring it together. So if you look at the word children, like who is this literature for? Can we answer that it's for all children? Possibly in our country we would say it is for a very small subset of children who can read and who have access to books, right? So when we say children's literature, already in the word children we have excluded most children. Then if you look at the word literature, if you look at Western definitions of literature, they'll tell you it is written works of, with a artistic or aesthetic quality to it. But in our country, I was introduced to literature as a child through what? Can you guess? What do you say? Louder? Stories, cartoons. Oh, cartoons and all, not at that. This thing, it was oral storytelling from my grandmother. So was that to be excluded? So you think about, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to do anything here. It just came on by itself. Okay, so oral and performative traditions are very strong in our country. So we then have to say, where are the boundaries of literature? Also, then if you say literature has to have artistic quality, then how do you define what qualifies as literature? Is anything written for children to be called literature? Definitely they'll all agree that chemistry textbook may not be called literature. But there could be another book on chemistry that is artistically produced that we could call literature. So there is a lot of grey area around this whole thing about who are children, who are these children we are talking about, and what is this literature that we are talking about. And then you bring it together and you say, what is children's literature? And again, is it like literature written for children? What do you think? Is children's literature usually written for children? But yet some of these books that, for example, I grew up reading, I don't know if you did, like Robinson Crusoe and Gulliver's Travels, were never written with children in mind. The mythology that many of you may have read in Amar Chitra Katha was not created for children. So we don't even know what children's literature would be in that sense, because children's literature is neither literature that has a child protagonist necessarily, nor is it necessarily literature that is written with children in mind. So a very practical, pragmatic definition in today's world would be, it is what is on the children's list put out by publishers. We shall call that children's literature for the time being in a very pragmatic way, and with that I'll hand over. Yeah.
Well, that works as a functioning definition for now. And what portion of the publishing industry is children's literature in India at this point of time?
When I tried to get a handle on the statistics for the purposes of this book, I found that nearly 70 to 74% of all publications in India are dominated by textbooks, school textbooks. And then there's a whole bunch of other categories, but what you might call literature for, adult and children put together, that you read for leisure and pleasure, if you were to define it that way, is only about 4% of the total printed material that we are putting out. Out of that 4%, only 25%, that is totally 1%, is for children's literature, is dedicated. I'm not certain of these statistics. This was the closest that we could come to an estimation. So probably about 1%. And within the children's literature domain, we feel we have made, there's been an explosion, there's been a boom. We talk in terms of explosions and booms, but this explosion and boom is literally 1%. Yeah.
That's a small slice of the pie.
Yes.
But, and is it similar globally? I mean, globally, do you see that it's again a very small sliver, or?
I don't have the statistics globally, so I don't want to put out numbers. But yes, I think across the world, children's literature overall occupies a relatively small percentage of the total literature produced. So we have a lot of, scope to expand and truly create a boom in it, I would say.
That's going forward for a young population. And
can I just add?
please.
I just wanted to add to the problem of defining what is children's literature and also what is literature in itself, because on one hand, something of artistic and aesthetic value, some written text, that is how it is defined. On the other hand, it is also defined as something that mirrors society or holds up a mirror to society. Now, where do these two things come together? And that's where the challenge starts, where you have something that mirrors society, and society will have its good, bad and ugly, everything that is out there. And yet it has to have something of artistic and aesthetic value. And then for keeping in mind children as the readers. So bringing all these three, it's in the form of a triad where you try to bring all of these three things together and create something of value. So it's like Shailaja started, it's a difficult space to be in.
towards the end, I'm going to come back to that mirroring the society part, because it could lead to an interesting segue. But I would very much like you, Tultul, to please give a brief evolutionary history of how the children's literature genre has developed in India?
Yeah, so without going into dates or ages or eras, like Shailaja mentioned, we started as an oral, with the oral narratives, with the practice of oral storytelling. So literature largely was in the form of these oral narratives. तो कहानियाँ सुनाई जाती हैं घरों में, मोहल्ले में, बगीचे में, पेड़ के नीचे, है ना? So that is how शुरुआत होती है children's literature की. And then slowly, but these things are not written for children. तो पंचतंत्र की कहानियाँ हैं, जातक कथाएं हैं, all our mythological stories, ये सब पीढ़ी दर पीढ़ी सुनाई जाती हैं, but they are not really what you would define as being written for children, but they are narrated to children. And then in the pre-independence zone, you also have contributions. If you look not only at India but at the subcontinent, you have beautiful, witty things being written by Amir Khusro. You know, all those riddles and poetry and so on, which is being read out to children, which is being playfully, offered to children to solve. All of that. And interestingly, none of it is being written for children. The author is not really thinking of that. But whoever is taking it to children is taking it to children with that in mind, that, this is something interesting to share with children. And then we move on to the pre-independence area where a lot of nationalistic fervor is there. So largely for a long period you have in mind what you want the child to know or what you want the child to grow up to be. So, it is very, in that sense, very directed to an adult conception of ye batana hai. This is what my child should read. All the Niti Kathas, all the Jatak Kathas come with that whole sense of, at the end of the story, this is what the child should understand. So the moral of the lesson or the lesson that the story carries becomes so important historically. Somewhere soon after independence, National Book Trust comes up, just pre-independence and after independence, and plays a major role in the children's literature scenario in the country. They carry on with the nationalistic fervor of nation building, so a lot of interesting positive stories about India, about Indians, and about what India aspires to be. And they also start publishing in different languages. So the same book will be available in 14, 15 different languages. So there is that whole idea of all of us being together, unity in diversity, etc., all embedded in children's literature of that times. It's the late mid 60s and the late 60s where truly some amount of thinking of what is the child asking for begins in the space of children's literature. What is the child wanting to read? What is the child enjoying to read? And that's where we start finding books where everyday lives of children finds a place, where playful books, interesting storytellings, visit to the market, visit to the zoo, just as a playful conversation between a brother and a sister, those kind of books, late 60s and early 70s, they find the way. And also this whole pressure of teaching something to the child is slowly easing away. So there is a lot more of work in the space of illustrations, in the space of design, and so on that starts. That's also the time when, and this is largely what I'm talking of is children's literature in Hindi and English. But if you look at the children's literature in the other languages, then there is, the parallel history is working. So you look at Malayalam, you look at Marathi, you look at Bengali, and so there is a different space and time movement happening in all of these languages. So it's also very difficult and challenging to say what is children's literature in India, how has it evolved, because all of these streams are traveling together. But if we continue with Hindi and English, then post National Book Trust, I think in the last 20 years or so, a lot of excitement and a lot of effervescence has come up to be in the area of children's literature, both in terms of experimenting with the content and the form of books, and also giving space to diverse voices and different kinds of childhoods in the space of children's literature, and also voices of children in the space of children's literature. And I think that is a very recent development, maybe in the last decade or a little more, that this possibility has opened up. And so both in numbers as well as in quality, we have a long way to go and create that boom.
You know, you mentioned that there are many parallel journeys in all the languages that we have. We are a multicultural, multilingual society. And I was wondering whether illustrations in children's books, do you see them equally well done in all languages at the same time? Or you find that certain languages right now have begun a slower journey, they're catching up, and it's more text oriented and less illustration?
I think the journey has been like that for all languages, that initially it is more text oriented and slowly the space for illustrations builds. But I mean, I think the important question over here is also to ask of how valued are children's illustrators or children's authors in the whole industry as well as in society. And how will it be possible for a children, is it today possible for a children's illustrator to survive only through children's illustrations? No, it is not.
Even now it is not.
No, it is not, and in none of the languages. You know,
Perhaps across the world this is true.
Yeah.
They all have day jobs and then work on writing and illustrating as a passion. So that is across the world. It's not a, I mean, except for the one or two authors like J.K. Rowling or whoever who would just make it big. For the majority of people, this is not a day job. You can't sustain a livelihood with it, is what I hear when I meet people. So
That's interesting.
I remembered a definition of children's literature. Sorry, it's coming a little late, but
you haven't been teaching. You haven't been teaching for some time now.
For some time. So Perry Nodelman, who's a definition for today's times, not for earlier times, is children's literature is literature designed by adults for the pleasure of children, as that pleasure is imagined by the adults.
We're still telling them what to read and what to think.
Yeah.
But,
and what to find pleasure in.
Exactly.
What to find pleasure in. So that is the issue when you said that it used to be more moralistic and now it is less moralistic. The argument is that it's less overtly moralistic.
It's just more subtle.
We are still telling children what to read, what to believe, how to be, etc. But we are being far more clever in how we do it. That's
So we have learned.
Yeah.
So the adults
we are
have
being self-deceptive.
But tell us a little bit more about the book, Shailaja. How did you come up with the structure of the book and
Okay, I'm going to hold the book. I feel so happy about it.
and the chapters and the voices?
For the audience, for the sake of the audience, I just want to say, because my bio also said that I have written many children's books. I have not written a single children's book. This book is not a children's book. It's a book for adults, designed for the reading pleasure of adults on children's literature, as that pleasure is imagined by the editors and authors of this volume. So this is a book about children's literature. It is made for people who are interested in understanding children's literature in contemporary India. It's made for people working with children in variety of capacities, librarians, academics, people working with the education sector, and just parents and interested adults. Whoever loves children's books and would like to understand the scene today will find something of interest to them. So in terms of coming up with this book, it is there are not too many volumes of this kind for understanding the children's literature in India. So it had to be a slightly broad volume. We couldn't just super specialize and pursue only one kind of writing in it. So that is why it is this thick, and there are 4 sections to it. In the first section, we give sort of an overview, so a little bit on the history that Tultul has spoken about. Radhika Menon has written on that. Deepa Kiran has written, this is by the way a collection of edited chapters. So different prominent people have contributed to this volume. Deepa Kiran has written on the oral and performative traditions. So there is an overview section. In the second section, we help readers to look at aspects of children's literature. For example, illustrations. If you would like to understand illustrations, Deepa Balsavar has written a nice chapter on that. And then we have different subcategories. Fiction. Tejasvi Shivanand has looked at how the fiction has developed over the last 30 or 40 years. Young adult literature. Devika Rangachari has looked at that. Young adult are those strange creatures who we cannot call children and neither adults. So the kind of creatures who in my generation, when we got into that young adult category, we used to read our parents' books. We used to read adult books. But now there is a special category, and publishers put out themes and books that we feel will be relevant to the concerns of this age group. And I see some members of this category here in this room today, and I'm sure they'll benefit from the recommendations in this chapter. And then we have a chapter by Nivedita Subramaniam on literary non-fiction. Just like in the beginning I told you that a chemistry textbook, we'll all agree, is not children's literature. But there could be a wonderful text on chemistry that would count as literature. So looking at developments in non-fiction. So the second section of this book looks at different aspects, helps you to understand developments in different aspects, different genres of children's literature. The third section looks at issues. For example, Tultul here has written a chapter on representations of different kinds of children and childhoods in children's literature. So, as I said, when we say children, who do we mean? There are multiple kinds of children and childhoods in our country today. It is not just an urban English-speaking landscape. We also have regional language-speaking children, tribal language children in rural areas, children in all kinds of circumstances leading very, very different kinds of childhoods. Do they get represented in these books? Representation is a big issue in our country and culture. All of us can understand this to some extent, those of us who have grown up reading Western books where we felt excluded. Yeah? Is this relatable? Yeah? Or you watch probably now your Netflix series or whatever, and you're wondering, where is that cafe where all of us can hang out? And, so yeah. So we all understand what it feels to be excluded, but there are levels of exclusion. And so there are many children who are still being excluded in our country from being represented. So Tultul's chapter is a very important one. Like that, translations is a very important issue in our country. So there is a chapter where 3 translators have written. So we looked at translations. Jerry Pinto and Manisha Chaudhary and Arunava Sinha have written. Then V. Geeta has written looking at innovations. There's innovations, constant innovations happening. So some interesting experiments, some interesting innovations. There's a chapter on that. There's a chapter on designing books for children with special needs by Namita Jacob and Teresa. So we have never thought about this, but how do children with special needs access? What kind of literature do they access? So that's a third section, looking at issues in children's literature. And the fourth section is about using literature with children, libraries, language classrooms. How do you use? So I have got a chapter there with a couple of my students on using literature in language classrooms. Sujata Norona has looked at how do children respond to this literature being shared with them. So it's a very lovely anecdote she works with in Goa in government schools. And the book was, I forget, about something completely different, but when this book was shared with children. One of the children said, "This is a rich person's book." And she said, why do you say that? Because she had not noticed or thought about it as a rich person's book. And the child pointed to an illustration where the floors are all tiled and has picked up on that and said, this is a rich person's book. So then they went on a journey through their library to find out which are the rich people's books as per the illustrations versus not. So children's responses to books, and of course the free libraries movements. Mrudula Koshi has written a very important chapter on libraries and giving children access to libraries. In the middle of all of these fairly serious chapters, we have got voices, just brief pieces, an author, an illustrator, a publisher, a reader. People have just written, an editor, have just given their personal experiences of working in this domain. These shorter pieces we call voices, and they are interspersed throughout. We felt it brings people's direct experiences to the readers, and it breaks up the seriousness of the other chapters, which are very well researched and long. I want to say one last thing. The reason many people ordered this for their 6-year-olds when they saw the cover of it, and they wrote to me saying, we've ordered it for our grandchild, we've ordered it, and no. The reason is that it is being produced, it's a book on children's literature, and we wanted it to look, have the design and touch and feel of of children's literature. Thanks to Eklavya's wonderful design team, we have got a fully illustrated. We are very, very proud of the fact that this is full color, and it's got all kinds of lovely illustrations. So even though it is, I said it's serious, it is also very beautiful, and it is very affordable. So the design and the pricing, I'm extremely grateful to Eklavya for.
I'm also displaying this because this is Puribai's first book, also published by Eklavya, Soja Ullu. And because we are celebrating Puribai's work in the festival.
And in the mementos. So it's very coincidental, and I should say serendipity here that we have a book that she did. And you've touched upon this a little bit before, but I'd like you to please elaborate on who is the Indian child that the authors are writing for. And
yeah, so I think like Shailaja also touched upon it, I also kind of brushed past it. Largely, if you look at any language, most of the languages where children's literature is being created and published, it's a very thin slice of society that is being addressed through this. Middle class, school going, fair complexioned, many times majorly male child, and so thinking of a heteronormative society and focusing on the male, and maybe even well dressed and fair complexioned. So it's a very thin slice of children who find themselves in the books that they are reading. And one of the things that is spoken a lot about books is that they, and especially children's books, is that they have to be the mirror and the window, where you see yourself when it's a mirror, and you just let your imagination go when it works as a window. But the mirror part is very, very limited, where a very small portion of the children's population will find themselves reflected. Even language-wise, you see that the number of books that is being published in English for children today in India far outnumbers the number of books being published in Hindi or other languages. Then representation of caste, representation of gender, of religious beliefs and locations, of so many kinds, differently abled children. You actually find books which you can count on your fingers. The numbers you can really count on your fingers. So the perception of who the reader is in the author's mind is largely shaped by their own experiences probably, and because the space for diversity in authorship also is limited, and it is mostly the educated middle class which is writing, so that is being reflected. So neither is there, I mean, of course things are changing, so thankfully things are changing very, very slowly. So there are authors like Du Saraswati, or there are authors like Kancha Ailaya or Muhammad Khadir Babu, who are writing for children, or there are, Jacinta Kerkata, and even Bhuri Bai, who is, writing and illustrating. So there is a shift, but it's a very painful and slow shift, and a lot more effort needs to be done. And I think even among the authors of the the mainstream authors, the readiness to reach out and understand this diverse readership, that is also a space where a lot of work needs to be done. So the possibilities of socializing with children who come from very different life experiences and who you have to write for, that also is a space that needs a lot of work.
So there are many challenges ahead that lie ahead, even now. And what sort of genres do you see represented in the body of work so far? And are there some that see lots and lots of titles and some that are completely left out? What would you say regarding that, and how is the trend? What do you see growing in years to come?
I should also say one more thing, that this book only looks at the last 30 years or so of publishing. It is not a comprehensive history, because the history is very vast, and we felt that this is quite a thick volume, and we didn't want to ask readers to buy 3-volume set. So
not yet.
Yes, not yet. And as I say, it's already a good paneer maker. That size, weight, etc. We felt is perfect. So we thought we should limit it to this last 30 years. And why last 30 years? Because as Tultul said in the history of Indian children's publishing, one of the most exciting things happened around the late 1980s. I mean, many exciting things happened prior also. But around the late 1980s and early 1990s, independent publishing houses got set up, as well as NGO-led efforts to publish children's literature. These two kinds of initiatives came, and also it happened to be around the time that the economy got liberalized, so global influences, access to global children's literature, etc. grew. We've always had access to global literature. When I was growing up, we had a lot of Russian books, we had a lot of Chinese books, etc. And prior to that, if you ask my parental generation, the people who could read in those years were reading a lot of British books. So it is not that we have not had access to global trends, but in a way we got access to vastly more in terms of the quantum of countries and resources. So a lot of influences started shaping our understanding of what genres, etc., that we should be producing. So so it is a period of wild experimentation. So that is why these last 30 years have been quite exciting for those of us who are interested in children's literature. One of the genres that has really come up in these last 30, 40 years is that of the picture book. Now, Shailaja asked earlier about illustrations, and the thing with illustrations is when you try to produce books with a lot of illustrations, it drives up cost, because it's not just the illustration, it's also the design, the printing, etc. So it drives up cost. So earlier, when the National Book Trust and the Children's Book Trust and all produced books, they produced what we call illustrated books. I'm sure you all understand this because we have all seen such books where there's a story and then there are pictures illustrating that story. Yeah? But the idea of a picture book is somewhat different from an illustrated book. So the picture book, in the picture book, the pictures and the text together tell a story. It is not that the text is illustrated to tell a story. Do you understand the difference? Like, one is that there's a story and then somebody draws matching pictures to show that story through the pictures. Another is that the together you can make a better sense of what is going on.
So
Is
something in the illustration will actually add to the story. It's not just something that is supplementing or just explaining the story.
I think it's there here too, no? I know, I'm forgetting where is it, where I mean, there'll be some examples of it somewhere here, where,
Like in this one.
you would know exactly.
Yeah, so the context, details and all of that, the cultural milieu and all of that is not described as part of the story but is added on in the illustration.
No, for example, I would go to work with my parents in the fields, but then the kinds of work will be illustrated through the text. So the text would be simple and the illustrations bring examples, meaning, a richness. So this idea of picture books, which was very well developed in the West, started coming in the last 30-40 years as different from the earlier illustrated books that NBT, CBT, etc. started were producing. So I think that focus on illustrations as central to the text and design, production, design became, these are areas in which we have made great strides. Because I came from Bangalore, I didn't bring all those books, but there are books. Eklavya, please visit Eklavya's Pitara if you haven't been there yet. They have all kinds of formats of books that fold out and pull up and open out. It's amazing. So production, design, illustrations and the picture book became very central. The other is I have already spoken about this whole genre of young adult literature. Where there's a special category of people with their special concerns and society is catering to their needs through literature. So young adult literature on a wide variety of topics, from the concerns of urban young adults like dating and parents not understanding and all of that, to other more serious books like The Year of Weeds I'm thinking about, where it's more ecological issues that are being solved by younger people. So younger people as very agentic and shaping the society they live in, those kinds of books.
We are nearly out of time. I'm so sorry. It's a topic that we can all speak on for a very long time. But I'm really sorry I have to interrupt. No, but at this point we could just see if the audience has any questions. And can we provide a mic over there? Or shall I give? We can give this one. Thank you, Meeraji.
तो मेरा सवाल मेनन जी से है कि आपने बहुत सारी बातें कही हैं बाल साहित्य में, जिसमें आपने एक तो कहा कि डाइवर्स चाइल्डहुड जब हम बात करते हैं और सोसाइटी में जो इंक्लूज़न और एक्सक्लूज़न अवेलेबल है, इसमें 2000 के बाद जैसे आपने कहा अमर चित्रकथा को हम एकदम बाल साहित्य की तरह नहीं देख सकते, या तो किसे बाल साहित्य की तरह देखें और किसे नहीं देखें। तो एक आम आदमी के नज़रिए से सरल भाषा में समझना चाहता हूँ कि 2000 के बाद एकलव्य की क्या भूमिका रही है इस तरह की जटिल परिस्थितियों में काम करने की, और आने वाले कल में जिस तरह की कॉम्प्लेक्स सोसाइटी हम देख रहे हैं, जिसमें बच्चे पढ़ नहीं रहे, टीचर्स का भी पढ़ाने पर जोर नहीं है, टीचर्स खुद नहीं पढ़ रहे, तो ऐसे में फिर एकलव्य किस तरह से अपना काम, आप जैसे विशेषज्ञ कैसे देखते हैं इसे कि अपनी भूमिका एकलव्य कैसे निभाएगा?
No. So he is saying that, as an expert in the field of children's literature, what is the role that we have been able to play? So looking at it from a distance, and what is, what needs to be thought of ahead for somebody, some
you want
group
some
like
non-Eklavya person to answer it. Oh gosh.
Insiders will talk about it differently.
Eklavya has been very important. As I said, it's one of the key NGOs that has taken up this work and produced a lot of very important literature, as well as brought national attention to this topic and experimented with genre. So if you ask what is Eklavya's bhumika and contribution, it has been to focus national attention and to experiment and to keep the pricing low, because there are other publishers also that have brought out beautiful children's literature, but it is priced at a point that our children are not able to afford. So Eklavya also keeps the pricing, takes the pricing into consideration even while producing very, very beautiful, well-designed, relevant, high-quality literature. So I see it as a major player and a very important player. But if you say in today's climate, how can we shape this? I mean, this is really actually an open question. Personally, I don't know, because I think that we are at a inflection point. I always go back to that point when we shifted from orality into writing. And at that point, people were very scared that the children were getting corrupted by the presence of writing, because orality, memory, attention that was needed for the oral tradition was moving in. Why should you memorize anything? Because it's in the visual form, you can refer back to it. So there were people who worried when the entire society, entire society never went from orality to writing. That happened over, it's still happening. It is still happening. But at that point that writing is corrupting society, there was a feeling, and there have been philosophical debates like that. I feel we are now at an inflection point where we are moving from the written to the digital forms, and we who did not grow up with that culture are worried that our children are getting into digital things because it lies outside of our experience. A century later, society will know where it is. We are actually not, we are at the beginning of a change, and we are not well positioned to comment on this change. But no matter what form it is in, I feel that people, there's an urgent need for adults to consume literature in whatever forms it be. अभी हम क्या सोचते हैं कि बच्चों के सेहत के लिए अच्छा है ये, बच्चों से पीटी करवाओ और साहित्य पढ़वाओ। हम पीटी नहीं करेंगे, कसरत नहीं करेंगे, कसरत तो फिर भी करेंगे, पर वो पीटी वाला वो जो करवाते हैं बच्चों से, वो थोड़ा हम थोड़ी नहीं, it's not for us, it is for them. वैसे ही एजुकेटेड पेरेंट्स का भी यही स्टेप्स है कि बच्चों को लाइब्रेरी लेके जाते, खुद नहीं जाते, बच्चों की किताबें एक दो लेके देते हैं, खुद नहीं पढ़ते। अगर खुद नहीं पढ़ोगे तो बच्चों को कैसे, हाउ विल यू बी एन एडल्ट मॉडल फॉर इट? सो आई फील दैट एज Eklavya, in terms of working with teachers, working with schools, creating cultures of reading that go beyond children is the critical thing. Like when I work with teachers, I feel that you can give them any number of courses or workshops training them on children's literature, but until you train them to be readers themselves, nothing you teach can impact children.
So I think
reading models.
You need reading models, and you couldn't have ended on a better note in a literature festival. Yeah. But
say a few things.
It's working, it's on.
Hello. I would like to mention that the contribution that Eklavya has made to literature is immense. I mean, they come with a huge amount of experience. They've been working on it since past half a century. And, the people who are there, they understand the pulse of education and reading. And I don't see any other organization anywhere who can do it the way they are doing it. And so we were extremely grateful to have Eklavya here in Bhopal and to have them here participating. I have great respect for them, and I must say that people must visit their library here. Their book publication is immense, and they've translated all kinds of world literature into various languages so that people can. So both in terms of language and writing, I think they have contributed immensely. So
thank you for that, Meeraji.
Thank Eklavya for participating here.
Thank you so much. The quiz question?
Yes, the quiz question.
Yeah, we can just close the session because we are short of time. It's really interesting, all the discussions that you've had. Like, we can sit here and listen to you all for hours. Can we give them a huge round of applause for the amazing session that we had? Like you mentioned, stories are truly magical. Like you mentioned J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter. Like, stories actually become reality. We see, like, if you go to London, at King's Cross Station, you can actually see platform 9 3x4 and you can see as children run into 60 feet of bricks and fall with their heads, but because they believe in that story. So stories are truly amazing. Thank you for this amazing session. As we close this heartwarming and inspiring session, let us take a moment to appreciate the immense powers of stories. The stories we tell children today shape the future leaders, thinkers and dreamers. Thank you Tultul Biswas ji, Dr. Shailaja, Menon ji for sharing your creativity and wisdom and your passion for storytelling. We truly felt it. And special thanks to Shailaja Srinivasan ji for moderating this session beautifully. Thank you so much for sharing us the process of making books for children, which are actually the impressions of adults, like you told that what they find interesting, they think what children should find interesting. Thank you for changing our concepts. And now for the audience, we have a question that our speaker would like to ask you, and please listen to it carefully. Raise your hand if you want to answer, and our winners will receive the Living an Enriched Life by Dale Carnegie, a timeless guide to cultivating enthusiasm, courage and resilience needed to thrive in every aspect of life. It's an amazing book. So, a question.
Okay. So part of the answer has been let out. Eklavya is a children's publisher based in Bhopal. We have quite a few others. So can someone name 2 more children's publisher in Bhopal? And I'm happy that people from one of them are part of our audience today. Megha, yes. Yes. Yes, please come. And we also have Purple Turtle and Manjul. We want to give this to Megha. ये आपके लिए the gift book. अगर कोई जवाब नहीं देता ना तो भी मैं तुम्हें बुलाती हूँ. हिंदुस्तान से साथी यहाँ है, इसलिए our partner children's publisher in Bhopal.
Thank you so much. As we bring this profoundly enlightening session to a close, I would like to invite Dr. Meera Das ji, a valued member of our society, to please come forward and offer a memento to our distinguished speakers. This gesture serves as a heartfelt expression of our appreciation for your contribution and insights. Can we give them a huge round of applause? This artwork has been masterfully created by Padma Shri Bhil artist Bhuri Baiji for BLF 2025. This painting beautifully illustrates the interconnectedness of nature and the earth, humanity and the environment, encapsulating the vital and the cyclical relationship that underpins our very existence. Thank you so much.
Beautiful.
Thank you everyone. Thank you as well to our wonderful audience.